Hello everyone, how is everyone doing? Thank you for joining me on this new live stream that I'm doing on Wednesdays, where we are going to create a new project apart from the pet clinic that we have on Sundays. And it's going to be about we're going to create a learning management system using Livewire and Filament. The trick here is that we are going to use Livewire with Filament, and we are not going to use the panel builder as we are doing with the pet clinic. Instead, we are just going to use Livewire components, full page Livewire components, and we are going to include Filament elements like info lists, tables, forms, etc., whatever we see fit. So that's the idea. And thank you so much for joining me, Luis Alberto. I always have problems with this name. Let's see. Let me get closer. Island Hat. I hope I'm saying it right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me. Bugar, as always, thank you for being here. And let me show you what I have planned for today. So, what we are going to do, I'm calling this project Laravel Plus just because there are so many subscriptions, etc. out there. So this will be Laravel Plus. It's a learning management system where you can create courses and enroll in courses for Laravel, Filament, Livewire, etc. That's the idea. So just to give you a heads up, these streams are going to be shorter than usual because I want them to be highly focused. So we are not going to go over an hour. We could go a little shorter than an hour, but never over an hour. So an hour or less. We're going to focus on the tasks that we have for the stream. And if they take 45 minutes, that's fine. But if they take more than an hour, then we'll just make a small pause and then continue next week. So that's the idea. You can just call me Eight. Or sorry, you can call me Ain. 8. Like 8 number. Oh, okay, so I'll call you 8. That's cool. All right. Let's see. This is the tasks that I had for today. We're going to start, as always, from the beginning. We're going to create a new project. We're not going to use any starter kit for this project. We're just going to start with a basic project. We're going to install the Filament info list package because that's the one that I want to use first to display. The first thing that I want to do is show a page where we have a course description, like the course title, the tagline, how many videos we have, etc. So I want that to be the minimum starting point. So we are going to use info lists for that. And that's basically it. As I mentioned, we are going to use tests for this project. We are going to use test-driven development as much as possible. So the two tests that I have for today is basically just having a course details page that we can render and basically show a few details of that course on the page. And we are going to create those two tests, and we are going to follow the cycle of the test so that we can have those features in place. And the features that I'm talking about basically just show course information, title, tagline, the instructor name, total videos, the total duration of the course, when was the course posted, the course description, list of episodes with title and duration, etc. I don't know if we're going to get to all of those today, but at least title, tagline, and instructor. Good morning, Fanorama. Good morning, Raj. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you could join us. So yeah, let's get cracking. As always, let's start at the beginning. Let's say Laravel new. And as I said before, let's call this project Laravel Plus. We are not going to use a starter kit. We are going to use Pest for our testing. And I would like to initialize a Git repository. Application already exists. What is that? In new command. Wow. I don't think that's true. Let's call it something different then. Laravel LMS. No circuit. Pest. Yes. Apparently I already have something called Laravel Plus in my projects, so that's interesting. We're going to use SQLite for the database and for the testing as well. While that is going on, it's going to take a minute, but let's also go to the documentation for Filament Info List Builder, and let's copy this command from here. We're going to install this package to show basically the course information. I have this idea that we can use sections for the course information, one section above for the title and tagline and some course details, and then course description and videos. We are going to use info lists for all of this. Hello, Rafael. How you doing? Good night. Thank you for joining us. So let's copy this and this ready. Let's cd into Laravel LMS. And let me clear the screen and then paste that command here. This will take care of installing Livewire version 3, so we don't have to worry about that. And we can jump right in and start creating our components. Okay, so we have new project, we have Filament, and we have Livewire. So next thing we need to do is create our first Livewire component that is going to house the course details page. So for that, let's actually take a look at the documentation for Livewire real quick. And in the testing section, as you can see, we already have an artisan command that will allow us to create the component and also create a test file for that component. So I'm going to copy this part because I do want to use Pest for the testing file. So I'm going to copy this, paste it here. The Livewire component name is going to be show course. Utai, how you doing, my friend? Thank you for joining us today from all the way from Thailand. That's awesome. Thank you. So show course and then -- Pest. Show course. Show course or show course details. I always get hung with the naming, but I think show course should be in line with the naming convention that Filament already uses, like create course, edit course, list courses, and show course for the view for a page that only shows information with info list builders. So I think I'm going to stick with that. Show course. And congratulations, you've created your first Livewire component. Woohoo! So we have 3 files. One is the class name. The second one is the component view. And then we have a test file inside test features, Livewire, show course test. So let's open this baby in VS Code. All right. Let's check out our new files. So the Livewire class file has only the render method. Then we have Livewire resources, views, Livewire, show course, a bare bones blade view, care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner. Very true. And finally, our test file inside feature, Livewire, show course test, and we already have the first test scaffolded for us. Perfect. Hi Amit, how you doing? Yeah, we're live, and thank you for showing up again. Always lovely to see you here. So as you can see, with that command that we use to create our component, we already have the first smoke test already created for us, which is just rendering the component successfully. And all we're doing here is using Livewire test, and we're passing the component class and just asserting that we are getting back a status code of 200. Now, notice that we don't have routes at the moment. And that is one very interesting feature, or one very interesting thing when you're testing Livewire components. When you're testing Livewire components, you are testing the component in isolation. You're not testing the route that takes you to the component. You're just mounting that component, setting things on that component, and making sure that that component works as in isolation, basically. So we don't need a route to test that component right away. Let me just delete some of the default tests that we have right now. There is a couple of example tests in this project. So let me just delete those. There is also one in the unit folder. Already losing my voice. Wow. So right now we only have one test, and we can just go ahead and, if you don't have a plugin called Better Pest, which is the one I use, basically what that allows me is just open the command palette and then use Better Pest run. What that does is running the file, running the test that I'm currently in. It's usually a little finicky because, for example, if I'm right here at the end of this line, usually this wouldn't work, because if I do that, it's actually passed. Okay, that worked. So never mind. Sometimes when you're using this plugin, you have to be in the test definition line for some reason. But that's what I like to use so that I can test fast. If you don't have this plugin, all you need to do, didn't want to do that. It's go to the terminal and just run vendor bin pest, and that will run all of your tests in the project. One other good feature of the plugin, if you want to install it, is that sometimes you just want to focus on one test. So if that was the if that were the case right now, I would have to use filter and then type in the name of the test, or the test, for example, the test class file. So show course test, that will only run the current that test file. and that's basically the same results. Or sometimes you just want to run one test. I believe if you use, let me see, I think I had it at the beginning. One second. If let me see what the command is for running just one test. If I do this, right, so you can use filter and then the test name definition, basically this text right here. If you copy this and then do pest filter and then that, it will only run that test. But that sometimes can be time consuming if you don't want to go back to the terminal and test it and type the command over and over and over again. So I would recommend that you get this Better Pest plugin. Let me see if I can show you. Installed. This one right here, Better Pest. It will speed up the process a little bit when you're doing testing, and you can create keyboard shortcuts for them if you want, so that it's even faster. So, as I said before, this test is actually passing because we already have the component class, and the component class, it's rendering successfully, so that works. Let me focus on the folders view. Will this LMS project also include uploading videos and images, media, and streaming video files? No, that's a good point. This LMS, all of the videos for this project will be hosted in Vimeo. That's the platform that I'm going to use to host the video files and uploading video files. We are not going to go into uploading the files or doing any video conversion or video processing of any kind. That would be too in-depth, thinking that we can just have our videos in Vimeo and have them being private and just embed those videos into the LMS system. So yeah, thank you for the question. That was a great insight. So now that we have our first smoke test, let me mark it as complete. Now let's focus on showing course details. So what do we want to do here? Basically, I want to start by showing the course title. We're not going to worry about design right now, but I will take inspiration from this website called codecourse.com. I really like the design of this website, and it's simple enough that it's not too complicated to read. One thing that I have issues with some of other learning management systems is that they show you way too much information. Like, for example, Udemy, the course page has way too much information, and sometimes that can be overwhelming. So I want to keep it as simple as possible with a simple design and just a little bit about the course description, what are the videos, etc. And usually that's good enough for someone to just say, yep, that's a course for me, and then enroll in it. So I'm going to follow something similar to Code Course. But for now, in this stage, we're only going to worry about the functionality, and we are going to worry about the design later on. All right? Can you do subscription-based plans and billing? That's the idea. Yes, in my mind, there will be like a panel where the user will be able to subscribe and will have billing plans, like pricing tiers maybe. That's that very much in the future. But yes, we are going to try and incorporate a billing plan, monthly plan, or even if it makes sense at some point, we may consider course by course billing. But a monthly subscription sounds more like a sounds more like a plan. So let's get this test going. Let's get over here and let's create a new test. Shows course details. So as always, in every test, there are two or three sections that you should always follow. First one is the, what is it called? Arrange. There's the arrange part where you set up everything that you need for the test. And then there is the act, where you actually where you perform what the test should do or the functionality that you want to test, and then you assert after that has been completed. More often than not, these two, when it comes to pest testing, these two are mostly bound together. So you perform the action and immediately chain the assertion. So that's pretty much the format that we are going to use. First, we set up the test in the arrange part, and then act and assert as a second step. So what do we need to show course details? Well, we need a course. So let's start with that. And as always, when you're testing, what you want to do is use Laravel factories. So we are going to say course, which is something that doesn't exist yet. And we are going to use factory to create a new course, like so. So that should create a new course in my database. And then I can use that information or use that course to assert that we see the course information on the page. For the beginning of every test, I usually like to start with as detailed as possible. So I like to go in and actually set the state, we use state to modify the information that goes into this new course. And in this case, we need a course title. That is what we are going to assert first. And let's just set the course title as course title. We can rework this later, but usually it's okay to use static strings when you're starting your tests, because that is easier when it comes to asserting, and that simplifies the process of getting a failing test. Love to see you doing TDD on this project. Yeah, big win. I agree. It's not something that I get to do much often in my day-to-day. So I like to flex that muscle in my own projects and my videos, etc. So it does take a little bit more time to get into, but once you get in the flow of get a failing test, create the code to get the passing test, getting the passing test, doing the rework, and doing that cycle, once you get into that process, into that mindset, you start to get momentum and everything starts to speed up. But at the beginning, it's always a little slow, but it is always good, because the most difficult part of any project is to give the first step. And I find more often than not, creating a test helps me get out of my own head, because if I start to think about all of the things that I want to do in the project, it can be overwhelming. So you start to get stuck in I call it analysis. I don't call it. It is called analysis paralysis. Basically, you start to think about all of the things that you need and all the things that you want in the project, and you end up not starting, which is the most important step. So creating a simple test like a smoke test, it just gets you going. And once you get going, you start getting speed, you start to get momentum, and before you know it, you're working on your project for 2-3 hours and you're getting things done. But the first step is always the hardest. Hey Daryl, how you doing? Thank you for joining us today. So yeah, first thing we need is a course with a title of course title, and that will go into the database, which reminds me that we have to set up our testing environment, which is something that we haven't done yet. Thankfully, that is very easy. All you need to do is open phpunit.xml, and the two things that I need is basically an SQLite database for my DB connection. Let me uncomment that line. And also, we want our testing database in memory. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, in-memory testing basically means that for every test that you run, you're going to use an SQLite database, 1, and 2, that database will live in memory, not in a file. It's not going to conflict with your actual database file. It's going to be created in memory. It's going to run any migrations that, if you choose to do that, is going to create records, and you're going to work on a database that lives in memory. And once the test is done, that database is gone as well. So it's very useful when you want to test things and you don't want to conflict with a real database or real data. Would love to also see you using types, value objects, and data transfer objects for lessons and course domain design. That's a good idea. I don't think I've ever used DTOs ever, so that'll be an interesting topic when we get to it. We'll try to find it. We'll try to squeeze it in our project. So we got our database, testing database configured. Now we create a new course using a factory, and then on the act and assert, what we want to do is use Livewire test. We want to mount our component using show course class. And then, first of all, I need to make sure that I always like to do assert OK first, just to make sure that the assert OK and assert status 200 are basically the same. Just making sure that when you run your test or when you mount your component, what you get back is not an error. One thing that throws me off or used to throw me off sometime is that you create a test and you, for example, want to assert something like this. Assert C text. And usually what I want here is to see the course title, which is basically the course title that I assigned to my model, the record that I created in the database. So I want to be able to see that in the page. I am missing a key component here, but basically, if you do this, sometimes if you don't use assert OK, what you get in response is the Laravel error message or the Laravel error page where you see the error stack and everything related to the exception that you got. But sometimes that page in its entirety will contain the text that you were asserting for. So if you are just asserting to see that text in the page, even though it's an error page and you got an exception, you actually get a passing test, and that is a false passing test. So always make sure to assert OK when you are doing this kind of testing, just to make sure that your test returns an actual 200 response. Now, as I said before, I am still missing one key component here, and that is I need to pass the record that I just created in the database into this component because we are testing in isolation. So what I do is in a second parameter, we include in a second parameter for the test, we include a parameters array. And in that parameters array, we are going to pass a parameter called course. And for this, we're going to need to put this course in a variable. So what this does is, if we were to run this as a full page component and put this and render this with a route, with a route get, and then we use the URL for the route, and as a second parameter, we just use the component class, which is how full page components work. That parameter course will be passed in the route. So if you pass that in the route, it's also going to be passed into the component, and it's going to use route model banding. So at the end, you get an instance of this course. But for now, since we are testing in isolation, all we need to do is to pass the course model into the component like so. And this obviously is going to fail in so many levels, but that's what we want. For domain-driven design, please look at Laravel, what is it? Laravel data package from Spatty. Yeah, we can look into third-party packages if we see the need for them in the project. Totally. Now, this is basically the test. So let's get to the most exciting part, and that is let's follow the trail. Let's follow the errors. Let's get a failing test, and then just follow through. And that is the key point. Always focus only on the error at hand. Don't get ahead of yourself. Whenever you get an error in a test, fix only that error, and fix only that error with the least amount of code that is needed. Don't start thinking about 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. Even if you know that you're going to need it, allow the test to give you the next step. That is always a good state of mind when using TDD, because that will get you moving. And when you focus just on the error at hand, you actually get to gain speed over time. So let's run this. Gonna make this a little bigger, close this tab. And our first error is class course not found. Course is our model class, and of course we don't have a model class yet, so we need to create one. For that, I'm going to use PHP artisan make model, and I'm going to use the M flag to create a migration file for it, and also the F flag to create a factory class, which is technically breaking my own rule, because I'm creating two files that I didn't have in a single command. But since it's just as easy as adding 3 letters in the model creation, I don't see why not doing it. Oh, of course, we need the model name, which is going to be course. So we get 3 files: the course class, model class. We get a database factory called course factory, and we also get a migration file called create courses table.php. TDD is also about designing your domain. Ken Beck said a design insight can allow you to do more fine-grained testing. Sorry, I read that wrong. A design insight can allow you to do more fine-grained testing. Ken Beck. That's very, very true. Okay, so we have our model. We need to import that. So let's bring that in with use app models course, and let's see what the next error is. As you can see, I created 2 files. I created a migration file, I created the factory, but I'm not going to worry about those yet. All I needed to do was to create a model, and that was the error, and the solution is already applied. So once you have the code to fix the problem, run the same test again. And now we have a different error. Right now, this error reads no such table courses. Why don't we have a course table? Because we are running our test, but we are not instructing Pest to refresh or even run migrations in our database. So we need to go ahead and fix that. How we do that is we have a Pest configuration file in our tests folder, and it's called pest.php. And by default, this line is commented, and this line is what allows us to basically, for every test that we run, we are going to refresh the database, running all of the migrations that we have. So that's basically what it does. So just by uncommenting that line, we can run the test again, and we'll probably get a different error. And we do. The error now is the table courses has no column named title. Now we get to the point where we need to add the title column into our migration file. For that, let's open our migration file, which was called create courses table. And that was scaffolded with just an ID and timestamps, but we need one more column. We're going to make this column a string, and let's call it title. That's it. Once we have that in place, now we need to run the test again. And what I'm doing here is just open the command palette with Shift Control P or Shift Command P if you're on Mac. And I'm using Better Pest Run Previews. And what that allows me is the ability to not to go back to my test file, which takes one step ahead. It takes one extra step for me. Instead, I just focus on fixing the problem that I needed to fix and just run the same test again. And I'm not worrying about the whole test suite. I'm just focused on one test, focused on one error at a time. And now the error reads, failed asserting. This is always great because it means that we have arrived at the asserting part. And that means that everything else that we needed for our setup, our database, our models, our factories, that's all in place. Now, when we perform the action, which is just rendering the component, and we run the assertion, that's the part that is failing, the assertion, and that is the final part that we need to fix. Failed asserting that is just a couple of new lines, so 3 lines of text, contains course title. So now we need to modify the components view to include the course title. But in order to get to that point, we need to back up a few steps, because we cannot put anything in the components view if that component does not have the data first. In order to pass data into the component, as we did here, we pass that as a parameter. And we call that parameter course. So in order to get this into the component class, let me just close a few windows here to make space. So we go back to the show course component class, and we need a new method. Actually, we need 2 things. First, we are going to have a public, I'm going to create a public course property. So basically I'm creating a property in our class that is public, and that will contain the course that we are going to work with in this component. And whenever you create a public property in your Livewire component, that public property is also available in the view. So there is no need, for example, to pass any data in this render method. This course variable is going to be immediately available in the view. And I can show you, if we, for example, did something like, let's create an H1, maybe an H2 actually. And let's say course title. I'm just doing this to show you that the course variable is available in the view, but it's not part of the problem fix that I'm doing. And in fact, I shouldn't even be this far ahead. I'm just showing you that if I run this, if I have that in my view and I run the test again, I have a different error. So cannot assign app model scores to property. App Livewire show course. Did I not import? I did import it. I didn't import it. Hold on. Let me try that again. Well, that is interesting. Huh. It is passing. Does that mean... Oh, that's very, very interesting. That is something that I didn't see when I was researching for this. I initially thought that if, for example, I thought that you needed to create a mount method. And on that mount method, you had to pass in a course parameter. And then public function. And really? There you go. And in this method, you would then do this course equals course. This is a good point. I mean, I have an application that was using Livewire 2. Now I'm trying to use version 3 and not work when I pass a public model as me. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that I thought I needed a mount because, again, that's probably I have to pass each public property. So that means that, it means that if I pass a second parameter, for example, let's test this. Let's test this theory. I'm not going to have a mount here, right? So if I go to show course test and I pass a second parameter, just a string, maybe, is it going to complain that there is no public property called foo in my class and therefore fail to assign that to the public property? Let's find out. Nope, that's not the case. So is it, it's kind of hard to gauge if this is really passing or not. I guess the real test would be just to remove this, maybe. That for sure will fail. Yes. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So it's, I guess it's just allowing us to let's try something else. I guess what this is doing is just grabbing the parameters from the test and assigning those parameters directly into any public property with the same name. Is the name something that has to do with it? What happens if instead of course, let's just call it record? So in the test, I'm passing course. Let's get rid of this foo bar. So is it going to say I don't have any public property called course and therefore fail because the record title is never assigned a value? Let's find out. Yeah, that's failing because we have an undefined variable in our view. Oh, I did double, that's on me, double $, that's fine. But it's still failing because we are attempting to read a property title on null because record was never assigned. And this is what I thought I needed to do, because now if I uncomment the mount method and actually let's not use course, let's just use model, for example, to make it more general. So if I assign this record, if I assign the course to this record, try to do this XPT. What is XPTO? Am I reading that right? I'll try that in a second. I just want to try this first. So I save that, run the test again, and now it should pass. Yes, it does. And just to make sure, let's go back to how it was. Let's call it record here. Let's get rid of the mount. Let's call this course. So in our test, we are passing course, and that will directly be injected into a public property with the same name. I'm guessing this might be, is this something new that I didn't know about? Something in the latest releases of Filament? Sorry, not Filament, Livewire. I never saw anything like this in documentation though. If I come to, let's say, show course in the render method, let's just go with dd this course. And let's run the test again. And yeah, it is the model that we pass as a parameter. Interesting. That's great, because that allows us to not have like a shortcut instead of having to create the mount method and then have each parameter that we pass in be assigned to public properties, which are ultimately going to be used in the view. If the parameter passed in has the same name as a public property in our component, then that property is going to be injected, that parameter is going to be injected in the public property of our Livewire component, and it is immediately available in the view. That's very, very interesting. If this is something old, let me know in the comments, by the way, if this is something old that was introduced in Livewire version 3 from the start, or this is something that came later on, because again, I've read the documentation. I never, in fact, let's take a look at the documentation again. When it comes to components, setting properties. It's just setting properties. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about the mount method. I guess it might be something that I overlooked, to be honest. Passing data into components. This is just as parameters when you're using the component as inline component like this. But you see, maybe it's just when you're using it as an inline component, because they do have a title parameter here and then a public title property, but they are using the mount method to set that public property with the value of title passed in as an inline property. I'm curious if we were to try, it probably will work, because if we are testing this in isolation, it really doesn't matter if this component is being used as an inline component or as a full page component, because passing this as a parameter works in both ways. If you're using it as an inline parameter, this will be the same as using the colon property name equals the value, that is a parameter into the component. And if you're using it as a full page component, that parameter comes in from the route. So it's going to work the same way without the mount. I'm guessing it will. I don't know how to programming. I have been learning, but I don't know how to make advantage of this. What do you take advantage of what are you referring to? They also added something like public function add. I'm gonna have to read more about that in the documentation then. Or maybe not in the maybe the documentation is a little bit behind the releases. I know about the set one. That one is mentioned in the testing part of documentation, because when you're testing a component, you want to test properties, and you can actually directly set the value of a public property using set. That I know, but that doesn't mean that that property is being assigned with any external parameter. So in this case, what I'm testing is I have a full page component that I am fully expecting to have a course, which is an external data coming from the database, passed into the parameter. It doesn't matter if it's through the route as a full page component or through a parameter as an inline component. Either way, it's going to be injected into the component as a parameter. So using set, you just go straight into the public variable with the value that you want to assert, and then assert that either that actually gets set or that you can actually see that value in your rendered component. But I'm actually going a little bit above setting the value. I'm just saying this is a component. This component is going to expect this parameter, doesn't matter from where. I want to make sure that from that parameter I can see the value in that, in this case, the course title in the render view. I think views should be passed in just the presentational attribute required render instead of the entire model object. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, just for... See, that's the thing. It's a good point though. You could choose to pass individual parameters into the view. And in that case, yes, we would need, let's actually make the point across. In my case, I expect the course to be passed in as a parameter to the component. That is not going to change because we are going to use full page components. So that when using full page component, the course is going to come in the route. We are going to use route model binding to pass the course model into the component, and then we are going to use that model in our component. But the true thing is, we don't have to pass that entire model into our view, and that is a good point. So instead of using record title, we might just want to use title like this. So in this case, we do need to have first of all, a public property called title. That's going to be available to our view, but it's not going to have any values yet. So if we save this and run our test like so, it's going to fail with the previous error saying that we don't have course title in our render view. So in this case, we do need a mount parameter, a mount method which is not going to take any, it will actually. We are going to take our course in as a parameter into our component, and then here we are going to say this title equals to course title. And now our test should pass because now title has the value, and that way you can be more granular about how much data it is passed into your view. So you can choose to pass each and every single detail of the course into the view, and you have control over it. So those two approaches are valid. If you want to have control over the data in your view and you're worried about that your model has too many data and it's going to slow down your view, then yes, use individual parameters and just control what data goes into your view. I went into the test passing in the model because I knew it's going to be small. And again, this is something that can evolve over time. We can start passing the model first, and because it's shorter, and then over time we decide no, it's slowing down, and we can even in the future we can use the new stressless plugin in our application just to make sure that our application it's performing well. And at that point you can always rework your test, always making sure that first you have a passing test before reworking, and after the rework you still have a passing test. That's the requirement. Hey Hamad, how you doing? Hey, are you lost? Did I lose you? I'm sorry about that. Again, if you have at the end you have questions about this, I know I might be going a little too fast. So if I lose you with any specific terminology, please do ask any questions that you want in my Discord server, even if it's not related to any project. Just as you can ask questions about just concepts, like for example, test-driven development or how to test something. If you have questions like that and I lose you throughout this introduction, do go ahead and ask me any questions in the Discord server, and I'll do my best to answer them. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I think we covered a lot of concepts in this first session. And again, we are not going to go over an hour. I think we are barely 1 hour, 5 minutes. So I already broke my first rule. So as I mentioned in the start, these sessions are going to be very focused, very very focused sessions with no more than an hour. So whatever we can get done in an hour, that's what we are going to do. So we're going to stop here. We created our first test. In that test is passing now. We learned a few things about about Livewire testing. And in our next session, we are going to rework this test. But instead of showing the data in our view using standard HTML, we're going to introduce info list builders, and we're going to rework our code so that we're going to show the course title as an info list element instead of straight up text. And we're going to do a little bit more cleanup. So if you like this content, if you like the stream, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.